The campaigns have come to an end as we approach the business end of the governorship elections. Focus will now shift to the preparations of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and the conduct of the governorship and state assembly elections. The ripples from the February 25 presidential election is still a topic of discussion to date, and how INEC didn't meet up to the standards the electoral body set for itself. Joining us on this show this morning to discuss the governorship and state assembly elections and how INEC can make up for the flaws from last election is Dr. Sam Ogwuche, Coordinator, Yaga Africa Center for Legislative Engagement. Welcome to the morning show. Good morning, Dr. Ogwuche.
And thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Yaga Africa, I think, had a conference. Was it yesterday or so, at which you were trying to guide INEC and draw INEC's attention to what it must do to improve upon the conduct of elections tomorrow, March 18, as different from what occurred on February 25. If you can take us through some of those highlights and what you think is important that INEC must address.
Okay. One of the key issues is the election manipulation risk index. Yesterday, Yaga Africa and some other CSOs launched the third iteration report of the election manipulation risk index. That is the EMRI. And the index is an accountability tool which is evidence-based and data-driven that maps out tools in the hands of politicians and other stakeholders to manipulate the electoral process. Now, the EMRI has 6 variables. One of them is INEC capture. And these are activities that are targeted at weakening the operational independence of INEC. And if you look at it, issues of deployment of resident or electoral commissioners with partisan background, and even the experience of some of them. There are some of them that are new to election management. And so if you put them together, all those, even attack on INEC facilities, intimidation of INEC officials, these things constitute an attempt to capture INEC, which is a red flag. The second variable is tampering with the voters' register. You will see that credibility of elections is largely dependent on the credibility of the voters' register. Issues of registration of underage voters, have been raised. Issues of registration of ineligible persons, like foreigners. Under the Constitution, you see that foreigners are not supposed to participate, but we have had instances where they are registered. And if you put these things together, they go to the credibility of the register. And then the third one is voter suppression. These are activities that are targeted at keeping voters away from the electoral process. You have issues of intimidation of voters, violence, unavailability of PVCs for collection. You see even outright PVC buyouts. You will see even theft of PVC. In most cases, people have been disenfranchised. And when you put those things together, it is also an indication of an attempt to manipulate the electoral process. And the third one is resistance to election technology. The BVAS and the IREF. These are major technological innovations that have been deployed of late to facilitate the credibility of the electoral process. But we have had instances where certain individuals and groups have come out to openly oppose and resist the use of these technological innovations. You look at the BVAS, for example. We have seen, even from previous elections, where the smart card reader was resisted. This time around is the BVAS. Some individuals in certain states have also resisted the use of BVAS. Some have even gone to court to challenge it. Even the IREF, you look at the February 25 presidential and national assembly elections, you find out that even INEC itself can be said to some extent to have been responsible for resistance to election technology, its own guidelines, which has been a matter of public debate. The failure to transmit to the INEC IREF portal is a matter of concern, and it goes to the credibility of the electoral process. In fact, why many people have come out to say elections were manipulated is because of non-transmission of results to the IREV as required by the regulations. Then we have history of election fraud. There are certain states that are known for election fraud. And these things, in fact, one thing we must state is that the EMRI is evidence-based. There's nothing new in it. So we gathered information from judicial pronouncements, credible domestic and international observers, trusted media organizations, and even observation reports. Even newspaper outfits, these are media organizations. So when you put them together, you find out that there are states that have this history of election manipulation. And we put these things together, even litigation against the electoral process. We have frivolous litigations. So there are states that are categorized according to the risk factors associated with them. So when you put these 6 variables together, any state that has 3 and above is a high-risk state. A state with 2 is medium risk. Those with 1 are categorized as low-risk states.
All right.
Now, what happened? Before the... Okay.
Yes, Dr. Ogwuche, we'll delve in deeper with regards to your observations and reports from the last election ahead of tomorrow's election. One of the things you identify is logistics, which we have talked about a number of times in terms of INEC's preparation or lack of in terms of their logistics. And one of the reasons you identify as part of the outcomes of your report is that the Naira scarcity or lack of access to money was part of the reasons for some of these delays that experienced by INEC and, of course, consequently the voters. I'd like you to speak more on this because a few days to the last election, the CBN said that they had released all the necessary cash money required by INEC to execute the election. So there's a bit of, it's not, it's not balancing there. What was your observation?
Well, if you look at the last elections, the monetary policy of the government, which of course was subject of litigation, some people have, have been of the view, of the opinion, that it was actually meant to curb vote buying. But as we found out, it became a tool for vote buying at the end of the day. Because one, if you look at the way the elections went, somebody who would ordinarily not have been moved by 10,000 naira, would be moved by even 1,000 or 2,000 naira because of the scarcity of the naira. Now, at the end of the day, in fact, even in some places, we observe that party, agents were using POS. Were collecting bank details of voters, and they were, compromising the entire process. So, if you look at the elections, the things that played out: 1, fuel scarcity; 2, scarcity of the naira, and the general economic hardship that the people are facing. So, at the end of the day, when you say low voter turnout, like voter apathy, it is fueled, or it was fueled in that election by these policies on ground. If there is no fuel, imagine somebody who had gone to queue up for fuel throughout the night, then going to undergo the rigors of voting. All these things put together. We are human beings, not animals, not stones. At the end of the day, it is only the living that can talk of good governance. So when people see that they have passed through a lot, then they need to rest. So many people stayed away because of all this. And you see that during the elections, we observed the 2 models of vote buying, which you can say was fueled, largely by scarcity of the naira. We have the prepaid and postpaid models. Prepaid is cash for vote. In this case, it is based on trust. We have given you money. We believe you are going to vote. When you have postpaid, which is vote for cash, it is a situation where you show evidence. That is why you see some people, they vote, they take photographs, they take snapshots to come and show. So what we can say is that these issues on ground before the election largely contributed to voter apathy and even election fraud. Because when you are battling for survival, good governance, integrity of election becomes secondary. So the hardship is enormous, and people are battling to cope. So instead of being an instrument against election fraud, it becomes a tool that fuels election fraud. And that is what we witnessed in the last presidential and National Assembly election. So what I can say in summary is that, yes, these policies, no matter how well intended, they contributed to the lapses. And what does it tell INEC? People have said that they had issues of internal sabotage. It calls on INEC. Like if you look at the Emory report, there are issues, points for action for INEC. You have to monitor. Those who have been found culpable should be seen to be punished. Because when somebody commits an offense and he goes free, it becomes a motivation for others to do the same. Okay. And INEC should also sustain redeployment. What we saw in Sokoto should be sustained. When you see lapses, you discipline the officer concerned, and that seems to be a kind of deterrent for others.
Okay. Dr. Ogwuche, there's a case that a lot of people are not talking about. The case in which some lawyers took INEC to court, and the court gave a judgment, the Federal High Court gave a judgment that two people can use their TVC, that's the temporary voter's card, which some lawyers have argued that it means invariably that Nigerians can use their temporary voter's card because it is the principle of the judgment that matters in this case. INEC went to court yesterday to stay on this and vary on this, but some lawyers are also insisting that it does not mean that the judgment has been, put aside because there's been a stay on it. Do you know anything as regards this? What is going on? What is the position now as we speak?
Now, let's take it from the angle of voter suppression. As I said earlier, one of the indicators of voter suppression is unavailability of PVC. Production of PVC is solely the responsibility of INEC. If people have registered, their names are in the register, they can't be verified, then why should they not vote? People have gone to court, fine. In fact, in the report released yesterday, there is a recommendation that going forward, people who have even temporary slips, who can be verified, whose names are in the register, should be able to vote. If you are using your own inadequacy to keep me away, then it becomes a matter of institutional voter suppression on the part of INEC. Now, the court has given judgment that two people should be able to vote. As far as I'm concerned, that judgment should extend to every other person in the shoes of those two people. If INEC has gone to get a stay, the legal position is that if there is a stay, it means status quo will be maintained. If there is a stay, I'm not fully abreast of the facts, but if INEC actually got a stay, it means status quo will be maintained. And what is the status quo? No PVC, no voting. No PVC, no voting. But ideally, depriving people or preventing them from voting because they have no PVC is a calculated attempt to exclude them from the electoral process, which is no fault of theirs. So it is like the people paying for the inadequacies of INEC, which is regrettable in this electoral process. That's my view on that.
Dr. Sam Ogwuche, one of the things that Yaga Africa put out there yesterday at the conference is that Yaga Africa is going to deploy a certain methodology called parallel voter tabulation in, I think, is it Kano State, Benue State, and one other state, Delta State, 3 states.
Yes, and Delta State.
Delta State, yes. So
yes.
What is this parallel voter tabulation all about, and why those 3 specific states? And what's the legal framework? And is there a legal framework for it? Yeah. And is there a legal framework for it?
It's part of it's part of citizens' oversight of the electoral process. And this is even done in collaboration with INEC. Yaga Africa is not taking up the role of INEC, but what is happening is that results are sampled results uploaded on the IREF are downloaded, and tabulation is done. In fact, Young Africa deployed, is deploying PVT in these 3 states because of the peculiarities of those states. If you look at Kano, for example, the emergence of NNPP, the power tussle in the state, and the electoral history of the state makes it one of the states that we should see as standing out in these elections. And it needs a lot of citizens' oversight for the people to know. The PVT just, sampled polling units, and then elections are, results are tabulated, and then to see whether what INEC is bringing is within the margin. It may not be not 100%, but accurate. If you look at the PVT in previous elections where it has been deployed, it has been perfect, and that is why it is deployed. It is enormous. The financial application is enormous. That is why Young Africa is unable to deploy it to all the states, only 3 states. The choice of Benue is also because of the, the political arithmetic in the state. Now, if you look at it, the governor is having his own issues in the state, and then a reverend father is also coming out under the APC. This shows that there is going to be a lot of issues from the state. If you look at Benue State, you find out that, look, in the past, the incumbent has always been challenged by strong opposition. And this time around, it's like a special breed of opposition because of the character of the person coming on board. So you see, it is a battleground, not really in kinds of carrying arms, but electoral battleground in Benue State. And that calls for a closer look at the state. That's why Young Africa is, deploying PVT in Benue. Then when you go to Delta, in fact, it is another state that we should look out for. Delta, the Deputy Senate President, Obioma Agege, is coming up as the APC candidate. The PDP has always ruled the state, and with the pedigree of the APC candidate and the foundation of PDP in the state, we have come to realize that, look, we need close monitoring of events. In fact, not only the elections, we have been following events, pre-election events in these states. And PVT will be deployed, as I said, in Kano, in Benue, in Delta, for the purpose of influencing and enhancing citizens' oversight. When you are informed, it makes you properly equipped to plan ahead. So it will be bringing the situation to the people as they vote. But you look at it, it cannot succeed if the IREF is also not working. That is why if the IREF is not working, it frustrates the process. It frustrates the process because it is dependent largely on the IREF, because the results that are there is what will be used.
Hi, Dr. Ogwuche. Yesterday, during your press conference, something else you highlighted, or one of the board member highlighted, was on vote buying and voter inducement. In fact, you pointed out some hotspots which you had identified in Potiskum, in Yobe State, in Akwa Ibom, in Benue State. My question to you is, have you escalated this? Because this is an election offense. Have you escalated this in the event that you have? What was the response like from INEC or security agencies? And then another aspect of your report is that your concerns around the low voter turnout. What are your projections for tomorrow? Will there be anything that would influence your projection?
Okay. If you look at it, the report released yesterday is the third in this electoral process. The first one had 22 states as high-risk states. But this last one now has 27 states as high-risk states. And the stakeholders have been duly informed. In fact, the reports have always been circulated. What it tells us is that we should pay close attention to these states. Close attention to these states. not neglecting the medium risk states anyway, because this time around there is no low risk state. Because going by what happened in the presidential and National Assembly elections, some states that were on medium risk have now moved to high risk because of what played out in the elections. So INEC, security agencies, and even the citizens. You know, recently one police AIG said the police also need security, and people were laughing. And it's a serious matter, because if citizens don't volunteer information, those who come to unleash violence, mayhem, to deal with people, to snatch ballot boxes, to destroy beavers, they are people who live among the people. They are not strangers. And if you don't volunteer information, security agencies, our officials will not be able to act. So what that report calls for is a kind of an action on the part of INEC, on the part of security agencies, on the part of CSOs, and on the part of the citizens. It is actually a collaborative effort that will lead to a smooth electoral process. Now, on the voter turnout, many people feel now that the last election, the February 25 presidential and National Assembly elections were manipulated, largely manipulated. If you go on social media, it continues. Nigerians feel disappointed to some extent, but it will have an effect. There are some people who you even see on social media saying, our votes don't count, we are not going out to vote. But that is not, it's not a reason to lose confidence in the electoral process. The INEC has assured that election technology will be fully deployed and will be effective. The lapses noticed during the last election have been addressed, according to INEC, and the commission is fully ready to make the IREF functional. So, people are likely to be demoralized. It might put some people away, but this is a call for people to now come out to overcome the challenges and the disappointments of the past in order to move our democracy forward. You know, if there is voter education, enlightenment, we should know that what happened in the last election is not a death sentence on our electoral process. It calls for more action. People should come out because, one, this election tomorrow has direct impact with the lives of an ordinary Nigerian, because anywhere you are, your state government is closer to you than the federal government. Your legislator is closer to you than a legislator of the National Assembly. That is why people should now come out to vote. Come out. If you leave it, you know what baffles me is when people who never went out to vote also complain of manipulation of the process. It is better you go out to vote than staying indoors and complaining. You cannot make a change by not participating in the process. So my charge is that, look, we should come out. People should come out. Vote for your candidate without letting what happened in the past demoralize you.
Okay. So based on the earlier question I asked, I just got a message from somebody that says, you know, filing for a stay is not yet a stay until the court hears arguments and gives a ruling. So as of now, the judgment stays. You know, that's what somebody is saying. So as of now, the case is a lot of people can still use their, you know, TVCs, despite the fact that INEC tried to get a judgment. Because a lot of people are not talking about this, but this is something out there that based on the law, people can explore and, you know, talk about even more for better conversations. But moving further, as we speak, do you know some people are just laughing at us that all of this thing we are saying is all rubbish because they've already mapped out plans to rig elections tomorrow, to be able to harass voters and beat them and everything. And it's just a couple of hours away. Probably in like 15, 18 or 20 hours from now, we'll start seeing all their plans unfold. How can the people protect themselves in a place where the police is not there to protect themselves? Because we've had a case where the police spokesman came on TV and saying there were a bunch of young people, thugs, snatching ballot boxes, but it was only one police officer. There was nothing he could have done. He would have called for reinforcement. Before reinforcement came, the ballot paper had been taken away. And that place had to be cancelled. People wasted their times and they voted. So how can the people assure and ensure that they protect themselves? This is a big question.
Okay. Now, let me take you from the stay of execution. You know, as I said earlier, I'm not in the picture. I'm not fully aware. If what INEC did was to file for a stay, then there is no judicial determination of what INEC filed. So filing for a stay is not a stay. It means the earlier judgment is subsisting. So, but the issue is, in Nigeria, we are known of late for disregard for the rule of law. So we call on INEC to respect the decision of the court. Because if they have filed for stay and the stay has not been determined, it has not been granted, then it has nothing to do with the earlier judgment. So that is it. Then as to what the citizens can do to protect themselves. You know, when you see policemen at the polling units, they are not even armed. And, you know, it calls for a sober reflection. People should be able to speak. You should be able to give out intelligence reports. You should be able to stand your ground. You know, when you see people armed, you are not going to confront them. But these armed people cannot kill everybody. You cannot stay away. Go and participate. If they come and the state allows them, oh, I don't want to believe that plans have been made to rig the elections. I don't want to believe that. INEC has assured us that it is on top of its game, and we will do the best.
Okay.
So our own duty is to come out as citizens to vote.
Okay.
And then as you vote, you should be mindful of your environment. So
Okay.
you don't live, you don't, you know, chicken out because you heard that there is going to be violence.
Okay, just to corroborate, what I was saying based on the plans mapped out to rig election was based on a This Day report front page of, 2 days ago, Thursday, where they even highlighted some states and of yesterday, some states and the plans that were made already, that were already in full gear, and all that they were being planned. So it was based on that report, and that was the This Day report based on the allegations already on ground. Yes.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Ogwuche, first a comment
Oh, okay,
on the
okay,
ruling.
Fine.
First a comment on the ruling of Justice Obiora Igweatu on temporary voters' cards and permanent voters' cards. The main ruling in that case, taken to the court by Kufuor, Olusegun, and another, one Allwell, is that yes, because those two persons had been captured and duly registered, they could use their temporary voters' cards. But the judge didn't grant the third relief that was being sought, to the effect that, this should apply to every voter. And the judge said, no, the case was brought in an individual capacity, not in a representative capacity. So this does not mean that people can go to the polling booth tomorrow with their temporary voters' cards, because that ruling, as I had argued previously, was a ruling in personam, not in rem. That's by the way. But I wanted to draw your attention, yes.
Okay.
I wanted to draw your attention to one of the things that came up at your conference yesterday, which was Yaga, arguing that INEC, one of the things INEC has to do is to improve on its communication with the transport companies that will be in charge of its logistics. Are you saying that communication with transport companies helping to move voting materials was a problem in the February 25 election? And now in the specific case of Lagos, where in some parts of Lagos, there is going to be Oro Festival in Ikorodu, in Etiosa, and elsewhere. So, what happens to logistics? Although we are told that the festivals will end by 5:30 a.m.
Well, whatever it is a strategy, targeted at voter suppression. Because in the report I read from one of the newspapers, non-indigenous were warned and women to stay away. Well, why of all times, why is it on election day that Oro Festival is taking place. So that to me is a voter suppression strategy. Then if you go to communication with the drivers, road transport workers, it is necessary, because if these people do not move materials, elections will not hold. So they have become fundamental in our electoral process. If they do not transport, and INEC does not have what it takes to transport these materials on its own. So INEC relies heavily on these people to transport electoral materials to the various polling units and centers. So it is very important that they are in touch, they are on the same page. If you lose communication with them, then the election is going to be in jeopardy. So it is very fundamental. It is, in fact, it's a cardinal issue that INEC should address. Communicating with these people, making sure that all logistic arrangements are made with them. In most cases, we have seen instances where these people refuse to move, maybe because there's no cash or because there's no fuel. All these things are supposed to be, arranged ahead of time. INEC should be proactive in its operations. And this it can do by being in constant touch with these people that are in charge of moving these things from one point to the other. If they don't move, they don't transport these election materials, then where is the election? An election, we have about 176,000 or so polling units. It means that items must go to every polling unit, and you can't do that without these drivers. So it is very important to keep in touch with them by way of effective communication.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sam Ogwuche, for joining us on The Morning Show.